values are abstracts and they remain abstract till they are manifested in the world through your behavior. For me, a leader should be showing the path by manifesting those values in her behavior day in, day out.
Yeah.
Because that is what makes her credible. That's why people would believe that what she preaches is what she practices.
Welcome to the Seed Executive Insights podcast series, where we as Seed faculty members discuss intriguing topics with invited executive guests. I'm László, Aczél, and today I'm here with Sanjay Gupta, CEO of Grow Group and fellow Seed faculty, where we discuss the launch of his brand new book published by Seed Books, Leading in Uncertainty. Sanjay Gupta, welcome.
Thank you.
Sanjay is my fellow faculty in Seed, and we are here in this Seed podcast series of a new episode, and we're celebrating the launch of Seed Books, and Sanjay is the author of the first installment of Seed Books. What is your book called, Sanjay?
The book is titled as Leading in Uncertainty, Leadership Practices for VUCA World.
Wow. So many acronyms in one short sentence. Just tell us first what inspired you to write a book? What inspired you to write in the first place?
Well, to be honest, it was in 2017 that I wrote the first article, which became basically the framework for this book. That article I wrote starting after my sabbatical. I had a sabbatical after 25 years in the industry. And during that sabbatical, I had been thinking about what to do in the future. I decided to become an executive coach and senior leadership advisor. And I was trying to answer a few questions first for myself, because I realized I had a passion about leadership and I wanted to somehow articulate what are my thoughts. What do I value in leadership? What does it mean for me? And while thinking about it, I could not have left the context out. So the first thing that came to me, and it was in the beginning of 2017 sometime, that what kind of world we inhabit today. Mm-hmm. And that is the time when the term VUCA was in vogue. There was a lot of people talking about VUCA. And I will explain that in a few words, if it is fine with you.
Sure.
So basically, it's an acronym which is somehow depicting the world that we inhabit. V for volatile, U for uncertain, C for complex, and A for ambiguous. So this is the kind of world we inhabit. And once we have this kind of a world, what do we do as leaders to prevail in such situations which characterize any of the elements of VUCA? And that is the time when I formulated another acronym. So VUCA was an acronym which at least I didn't formulate because it was already existing. But I formulated or articulated an acronym called AVICA, because these were my answers to the world which we inhabit as leaders. And AVICA became then the mantra. I articulated it, and then I started developing it. Now again, as I said, it's an acronym. So it stands for A as in agile, V as in value-oriented, mm-hmm. I as in inspiring, C as in collaborative, and A as in appreciative. So that was my answer, saying that if a leader wants to be successful and effective in the current world, then the answers are to be perhaps sought in these attributes. Okay. So that's how the book actually happened. First, I wrote this book in Hungarian, because this happens to be, as we in Sanskrit say, my karma bhumi, which mm-hmm. means the place where I carry out my actions. Mm-hmm. So it was only appropriate to have the book first for my Hungarian audience. Mm-hmm. And that was done in 2021. And then in 2024 now, with Seed's support, this book has come out in English as well.
So what, do you see any parallels between, because you say this acronym was born somewhere around 2017.
Yeah.
Do you think the same kind of rules apply? And 2017, I guess, was pre-COVID
Yes.
then. So it, the real VUCA stuff didn't really even start happening, or it got...
Well, it was happening all, but anyway, yeah, you're right.
Things
You're
were
right.
happening, but then it sped up significantly after that. But
Absolutely.
do you see the same kind of problems in 2024 and the same tendencies happening in the world as then?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. See, what I feel that COVID actually brought the VUCA as a reality much closer to us, irrespective of which field we are involved in, because it affected all of us. I mean, I can hardly imagine an exception to that. So yes, the intensity with which the world started experiencing VUCA did increase during COVID, and actually ever since it has increased. However, the answers to be given, the only difference I feel is that perhaps the individual intensity of each of these attributes in terms of, or each of these attributes being a part of your practice, leadership practice, has perhaps slightly changed. In my opinion, when the world becomes so uncertain and so complex, then perhaps the significance of agility and the significance of values that you follow, perhaps it becomes even more critical than it was, let's say, pre-COVID.
Okay. Agility and values, is that A and V? So the first two letters of the acronym. So let's talk about that. So what, if a leader deems himself very agile in their work practices, and I think you quote, or you have a little case study on Elon Musk in your book. What answers is the agile leader giving this VUCA world? I mean, if we think about Musk or somebody else, what do you think defines an agile leader? Why has agility become so important nowadays compared to then?
Yeah, there are two aspects to it. First of all, how do we understand agility? And in my opinion, as opposed to a lot of other people, I wrote actually in the book as well that if life was a car, then agility is not the accelerator, but the steering wheel. So for me, agility is a capacity to change direction effectively. And that is the most important aspect of agility, which at times manifests itself in the world as being fast. But it is actually not about being fast. So that's one thing I always try to clarify, that agility is not equivalent to being fast. It is the effective way of changing directions. And the second thing I wrote about is the 4 tools of an agile leader. And I think perhaps Elon Musk fits in that framework very well. The 4 tools, again, is an acronym called the PEER, which is prediction, innovation, empowerment, and reflection. So what I was talking about was that there is an element of predicting the future. One, traditionally we may call it being a visionary, but it is slightly different to me. I feel it is more data-based. It's more sound in its reasoning rather than just intuition. Intuition is certainly a part of it. And I remember watching an interview with Elon Musk as a young man. And at that time, he was talking about the fact that he thinks NASA should be exploring the universe, but taking people to the space and bringing them back should actually not be NASA's job. There should be service providers doing it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, 20 years down the line, SpaceX, his company, was the one which took the American astronauts to the International Space Station.
Exactly.
So now this is what I call seeing it, predicting how the world will change and responding to it through innovation. So for me, Elon Musk is a classic example of being able to predict and then through innovation implementing those things, be it Tesla or be it SpaceX. Both these things to me show agility from that perspective.
Yeah, and I guess he also has to, I mean, with every company he encounters, there has to be, and nowadays, obviously, there's a lot of talk about the direction he's taking, Twitter and X and Tesla and all of these things. But I guess, agility is a key part of that as well to manage your audience or your stakeholders in that aspect. So that's the first A, right? Then we have values, and values. We can talk about your own personal values, the one your upbringing, how your values have been shaped through either your ethnicity or the way you were brought up or the countries you've lived in or the environment you were with, the companies that you work for, the teams that perhaps you shape or they shape your values as well, and the organization. So there's many different levels of values as well. So what's your take on that?
When I talk about values, the most important part I say is values are abstract and they remain abstract till they are manifested in the world through your behavior. So first of all, saying that I believe in these values or these are my values is to me a statement which cannot be supported unless you behave in accordance with those values. So for me, it's extremely important for organizations, but also for individuals to live those values. And that is what I talk about in the book as well, that values will remain abstract if large organizations, because most of the organizations have defined their values. They have even leadership values, they have corporate values, all these things are defined in these organizations. However, if there are beautiful posters in the corridors and perhaps in the meeting rooms, and that's that, then those values remain abstract. For me, a leader should be showing the path by manifesting those values in her behavior, day in, day out.
Yeah.
Because that is what makes her credible. That's why people would believe that what she preaches is what she practices. From that perspective, for me, values are important. But there is a second aspect of value orientation which I talk about, and that is about a consciousness about adding value as a leader. So you should be aware that all the activities that you're involved in as a leader are somehow and somewhere generating additional value. And if you do not see that additional value, then you have a duty to question the very existence of that activity. Why am I doing it if it is not adding any value? And that leads to a lesser level of bureaucracy in the organizations. That's what my belief is.
So why do you think, because you say agility and values have increased in importance versus the other, so why has values become so important? Do you feel that some of these values that is it because of the mistrust of the employees or people in organizations of these poster values, which my company deals with employer branding and stuff like that. And in many of the cases, these values do come out of management offsite meetings.
Yes, they do.
Where, they define the top 3 or 5 and they have very little link to, the organization, and maybe, they've just come out of a dream or ambition of some of the people who are there.
Yes.
But so what is your advice to these poster organizations?
Well, when we work with top leaderships, we have worked with leaderships defining their values also. In all these exercises, we point out the importance of credibility. Because, otherwise it becomes a lot of management BS. If you want to avoid that, the way is to be really authentic. So when we talk with leaders about these, of course, there is an activity of defining 5 to 10 and then trying to kind of figure out what are the ones which are the best fit for your organization, which is fine. It's to some extent also an intellectual and academic exercise, which is fine. But practically, one needs to explore the culture of that organization and ask some hard questions from yourself in terms of whether those values are really being practiced or not. So that helps to keep them grounded and not defining things which do not have a living example in the organization. Because if it is the case, if it is so alien to that culture, then there is hardly any chance to make it a fit. So we point it out to them, we explore the existing culture and try to keep them somewhere aligned with the reality in which that organization is embedded. So,
How have your personal values shaped your organization, or what is the fit there? Or what?
I can tell you one example, a story. Leave the organization, whichever that organization was, I was one of the people who could influence decisions or take decisions, however you want to see it. So I was a member of a senior leadership team. And during those times, the young undergraduates had to do a compulsory internship in that company, in any company. So,
Yeah.
And the rule was that they had to do minimum 3 weeks. And the companies where they did that internship were not obliged to pay. They could pay, but they were not obliged to pay. For me, when I realized this practice, and we had 2 companies, and we could keep 3 weeks in one company and 3 weeks in another company, so 6 weeks, and these youngsters would not get paid. So I asked, why is it so? Oh, but this is allowed. I said, that's okay. But I feel that a young person getting his or her first interaction with the world of work and profession, and if this is what they experience, that to me, it borders on exploitation.
Yeah.
And I don't want to allow that happening in this organization as long as I am the one who can influence it. So I told them, no, we will pay. There is a way to pay. There's no problem, you can pay. So, and these are, in terms of that company, these are minimal amounts. So I initiated that no, we will be paying. And then 3 months later, a colleague of mine comes to me and says, hey, imagine there was this young man who approached us saying he needs to do his apprenticeship. And he was so keen to come to us. He said, I don't want money. Just give me this opportunity. I was like, okay, so what did you say? She said, well, I said we pay.
Great.
So for me, that was one of the most, I mean, I was really thankful. I was thankful to the adherence to values, which I brought with me and I introduced in this context. And it lives on even today. Even today, that company does not have apprentices without paying them.
Great story. Let's move on to the next I, right? So AVICA, we've gone through AV. What's the I stand for?
It's the inspiring aspect of a leader. That's very important for me because during this uncertainty which we are enveloped with, I feel having the power of a clear vision of a desirable future is of extreme importance. Because that is what can give people the velocity as well as the faith which is required to move, so to say, out of the haze which surrounds us. And a leader who can inspire people through the power of his or her vision and conviction becomes a really, really critical part of this jigsaw puzzle that we call life. And that is why I formulated the importance of inspiration in your leadership practice. And yeah, I can
But
answer.
when you talk about inspiration in your book, you make a point not to confuse inspiration and motivation, right?
Yeah.
So there is a definite difference between the two.
Yeah.
And also another point is that I think inspiration is the only one which is not linked to a VUCA, VUCA, because every single one of them has an AVICA
It is in a certain
trait.
sense to uncertainty, but yes.
In a sense, yeah. So what is the difference between inspiration and motivation in your mind?
From my perspective, and actually it's not only my perspective because there are people much smarter than me who have worked on this concept, they talk about the fact that when it comes to motivation, the simple explanation is that for motivation you need goals, for inspiration you need vision. Now the vision has a larger canvas, both in terms of scope as well as in terms of time. So that is one aspect. Dr. Wayne Dyer once formulated the difference beautifully when he said, and I quote in my book him as well, that motivation is when you get hold of an idea and take it to its conclusion. Inspiration is when an idea gets hold of you and takes you where you are destined to go. So this is a slightly more subtle, perhaps a bit philosophical aspect, but I feel inspiration becomes of crucial importance because of the fact that in today's VUCA world, having a clear vision of future is a major challenge. And I have had a lot of workshops where leaders come to me and say, so okay, how can I become more inspiring? And my answer is actually pretty simple. I tell them, by being inspired. If you are inspired, the authenticity of that inspiration would shine from you. You do not have to do much to convince others that you are inspired. And if you are inspired by a vision and you share that vision with that conviction of your inspiration, I think you have a great chance of inspiring other people. So that's my concept of inspiration.
I think in this inspiration part in your book, I think there's a really interesting analogy between, and I'm not sure where it fits, the organizations as ashrams, and how in various life stages you can be inspired yourself and inspire others by being in that life stage, if I understood correctly. So how does that work, and how have you in various life stages been inspired and be able to inspire others?
See, that comes from the yogic lifestyle, from the Vedic tradition of India. The life is divided into 4 phases, which are called ashrams. The word ashram has the root shram, which means labor. So ashram is not a retreat where you just sit down and meditate. This was not the concept of ashram. The original concept of ashram was a self-operating, self-governing, and self-sufficient community where there was a guru or gurus who were teaching, but at the same time, these communities existed in themselves. They grew their own food, they tended to their own animals, they had their own milk. If they were required to build a house, they will put together their skills and build a house. So it was a very self-sufficient, active community, which we called ashram. But they were all students and teachers. So the concept was that. However, when in the concept of life it was defined, the root of labor was taken. So the 4 ashrams give the 4 labor that one is supposed to carry out in that phase of life. And that becomes, you can call it the vision or the reason, or I prefer the word the purpose of that ashram. The first 25 years is about being a student. So learning all the skills that you need to survive and thrive in your life in the future phase. And there, the purpose is humble learning. So you learn with humility. The second ashram is called, the first one is called brahmacharya. The second ashram is called grihast, which basically means the creator or the family man. The main purpose of that ashram is to create, procreate and create value in the world and procreate. So that is where the confident performance is the purpose in itself. So you learn to perform with confidence, leverage the skills that you have learned in the first ashram of brahmacharya and take it forward. Then comes the third ashram, which happens to be a unique thing because in no other philosophy, at least known to me, I have seen this third ashram. The fourth one, yes. But the third ashram is called vanaprastha, which literally translates into living in a forest. But it has got nothing to do with living in a forest. It's a phase where you start reducing your attachments to the world. Not your connections yet. You live very much in the world. But psychologically, emotionally, you start withdrawing. And that is the phase where selfless sharing becomes the purpose. You share what you have learned. You help your children in rearing their children, so your grandchildren. You tend to them. You help them understand things in the world. But you can do it in a corporate sense also by doing it in an organization, by becoming mentor and giving your knowledge. So that's the third phase. And the fourth and the final phase is that of renunciation, which is called the sannyasa, which means basically withdrawing from the material world and connecting with the spiritual source of life. And that is the final purpose of life. So these are the four ashrams, and I took the liberty of defining these four ashrams or superimposing these ashrams on the Aczél model of corporate life cycle. So, I mean, it would be interesting to read, I suppose.
And you yourself were in various lifestyles, so it's not a linear.
No, it isn't. It isn't. Thank you for the
You
question.
can go back and forth. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. At the age of 45, when I decided to become a coach and a senior leadership consultant, I became again a humble learner. Although I was in the confident performance phase of my life from the ashram perspective. So yes, they overlap. Sometimes you regress and then you go forward on that direction. And that's why I say it's not about the calendar, it's about the phase of life you are in that defines the ashram you are in.
So we've gone through the first couple of letters, and I think there's two left in the AVICA leader's vocabulary, or the AVICA leader. And the next one is the C, which is collaborative. So tell us why you think leaders should be more collaborative, and what VUCA challenge does that kind of...
I think a very simple way of saying it is the world is far too complex for the capacities of an individual genius. Of course, there are geniuses, but even they have single or bidimensional expertise. But today's world, with its complexity, needs multidimensional capacities, which the only way to achieve them is to enhance collaboration. So for me, it was, so to say, a no-brainer. I said collaboration has to be there. And I'm not saying this is something new. I mean, organizations have succeeded with collaboration even in past. But for me, that became a very important aspect, because in my practice, I have seen organizations struggling with this aspect.
Because of the imprint some of the leaders take, that they tend to be rather lone wolves rather than enforce this collaborative style in their decision making?
That's a part of it, yes. That's a part of it. But even otherwise, the silo mentality has existed in organizations for a pretty long period of time, and that actually is a rather large impediment in enhancing collaboration. So yeah, lone wolves can also cause it, but even otherwise, we just have to look around. There are aspects like how individual units, business units in a company are being appreciated or rewarded. Like just see the bonus system. You may find in most of the large organizations mutually contradictory bonus goals. So if you succeed, then I may have to bear the brunt of it. So that is happening a lot of times. So there are a lot of reasons why, but I think collaboration is the key. It is required to handle the complexity which VUCA throws at us.
You bring an example in your book. I think it is a Ford example, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's my favorite, where Alan Mulally, a great leader, he takes over Ford at a very critical time in Ford's life. I mean, the share is trading at $1 a share, which is as low as it goes, more or less, and they have a major challenge, basically in the total production. And Mulally decides to have a board meeting every week where there is a simple traffic light system about initiatives that they have introduced to better the performance. And every time he's surprised to see that everything is green, but the overall results of the organization are in the dumps. So, but he keeps on observing it. He's quite from that perspective. And then one day, one leader puts a red there. So first of all, Mulally celebrates that red. He says, "That's wonderful. Thank you for coming up with a problem which we can all together try to solve." And then he says, "So, that's great. But to be honest, I don't have the answer. But this organization is full of great people, and we will find the people who are needed to sort this issue out." And that's how he, on one hand, encouraged his people to come up with issues, because otherwise you cannot solve them. If you keep on trying on your own and you are insufficient in that sense, but you are not open to taking support from others, then the collaboration is hindered. So that was an example where I found it was such a powerful demonstration of the importance of collaboration that I had to put it in the book.
It comes back to one of our seed principles or examples as well, which we use occasionally, which is the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and the bottom one, which is vulnerability-based trust. So you are able to speak out. You are able to put a yellow or red dot saying, it is not going as well as you think, and I'm able to speak up and whatever, and we celebrate that you are, and that we can solve it together and come to a, because otherwise, if you don't demonstrate this, if you're not allowed, if the culture is not geared in a way that you're allowed to speak up, then obviously the thing will be dysfunctional.
Yeah, true, absolutely. So for me, collaboration is a keystone. And from that perspective, as I would be the first one to acknowledge, and as I said it earlier also, it's nothing new. One has always needed it. But the level of complexity has outgrown the level of specialization that we have created in the organizations, and that has led to silo thinking. So once we can transcend these silo boundaries and start collaborating across the board, I think a lot of challenges which the world is throwing at us can be handled far more effectively. And yes, you're absolutely right. One needs a lot of trust in the organization for that.
So we've gotten to the last letter, which is A, appreciative, I guess, is the word. So why do we need this level of appreciation, and who for? Who do we hand out our appreciation to?
Yeah. To all of the people who form an organization, and including ourselves. A lot of times we don't even, as leaders, we don't celebrate enough, which is to me very strange, because life is anyway full of challenges. So whenever there is a small chance of getting into a celebratory mood, we should grab it with both hands. Rather, we let those moments go. And that is one reason. But I mean, coming to appreciation in general, I make a distinction between appreciation and recognition.
Yeah.
Recognition is for what you have done, and appreciation is for who you are. The basic belief or faith there is that every single individual is valuable. They know something that is of value for the organization, and we should leverage it. In order to do that, you need to use a lot of, let's call them strategies, as they are called in the book. That's, by the way, not my work. It is a book on appreciative leadership, and that's where I take it from. And these are the strategies which help in placing the people in the right kind of limelight, supporting them in their growth, and helping them with intelligent questions. So that's why this includes a lot of things. The 5 strategies that we use are inquiry, so the art of asking questions, how you can express your appreciation even through questions by focusing on the positives. Then you have illumination, which means putting your people in the limelight. There's a beautiful quote that I mention in the book, which says, as a leader, you are the stage and the show is theirs. And that's a very important part. And then inspiration again is a part of it, because here also one strategy in the original book is called inspiration, which is about, again, the power of an attractive vision of future. And then we talk about integrity, which is what we talked earlier about, that your activities, your behavior should be in line with what you preach as your values. And the 5th one would be inclusion. Inclusion, again, should be not for the sake of inclusion. Inclusion should be genuine, where every member of the organization has a chance to contribute, and their contribution is not only asked for, but is welcome. Again, there's a lot of talk of diversity nowadays, no? And there's a quote where they say, diversity is being asked to a party, but inclusion is being asked for a dance in the party. So just having people around does not necessarily show inclusion. However, if you involve them, if you give them a chance to express their talent, express their subject matter expertise, then you are truly giving them an opportunity, by including them, to contribute. So these 5 strategies I recommend as a part of appreciation. As I said, appreciative leadership is already defined in this book called Appreciative Leadership by Diana Whitney. But I have drawn heavily on that to express my conviction into the importance of giving people their due, but not in terms of recognition only, but as in a deep conviction that each and every individual is able to and will certainly contribute if given proper environment and a chance. So that's perhaps more or less the crux of appreciation.
So there's a lot of things you need to demonstrate if you're an AVICA leader to tackle the VUCA world. You have to be it seems you have to be almost superhuman or born with most of these things. Is it learnable? Is it manageable? Can you take these things on board as you go along? You have to be born with these traits, or how do you see this?
No, I don't believe you have to be born with any of these traits, although each one of us, because of our evolution, have all these traits in any case. But these traits can be practiced and learned. And most of the leaders in today's world, is my belief, practice these things to some extent or the other. So it's a journey. My book is actually written to give this framework so that the evolution of a leader can be, in a sense, guided by this framework. But I would say having a conscious understanding of all these aspects, as mentioned in the book, should by itself help leaders in becoming more conscious about it.
And where do you think current leaders go wrong? Where do you think they suffer the most in this AVICA, let's say, challenge? Where do you think they're worst off? Because you say the values have grown in importance, but the walk, people don't walk the walk necessarily. They just talk the talk. So that's one of the things where it could go wrong. I also feel maybe that in terms of appreciation, there's slightly lacking in certain parts of the world. And I guess collaboration and agility are some things which they kind of tackle maybe more than others. So where do you think that the biggest gaps for improvement are?
See, to be honest, it's a very individual question. There are moments also, situations also, where a particular leader, in spite of being good in one or the other aspect, may perform subpar in that area. So I would not be able to give you an answer in terms of which of the AVICA values or attributes actually is perhaps the biggest challenge. However, one thing I can say is that just by reading about these aspects and making them more consciously aware of these attributes, which to my mind are expected of a leader, that can in itself help some leaders to honestly reflect and see their own shortcomings wherever they are. Each one of us has some. That's not a question. Just because I wrote a book does not mean that in my practice I haven't failed on one of these or more. So all of us, it's a long process of evolution, and well, I'm a believer, so I always say we can only try to strive for excellence and strive for perfection, but perfection is something we are never going to reach. So we can become just a slightly better version of ourselves every day, because perfection rests with Him.
Well, that would be the last word. There is no more appropriate closing for this discussion. The book is Leading in Uncertainty by Sanjay Gupta, published by Seed Books, and I encourage everyone to take it and give it a good read. And thank you very much for the discussion.
Thank you.